Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing the newest foundation from L'Oreal, and this is the L'Oreal Infallible Pro Glow Foundation. Now this foundation has been going all around the internet. Everyone's been excited for this launch and everyone is loving it. I know that Jeffree Star mentioned it. There's a lot of other famous makeup artists and really popular YouTubers and beauty influencers that have mentioned how fabulous this foundation is. And I am always a skeptic, so of course I had to get my hands on it and put it to the test. And I've been using this foundation for a couple of weeks now, so this is a full review. I'm pretty passionate about doing foundation reviews opposed to foundation first impressions. Searching the internet and searching YouTube, I found a lot of first impressions about this foundation, but I feel like you can't really tell how good a foundation is just by the first time you apply it. So I'm very excited that I've been using this foundation for a couple weeks, have put it to the test, and I can give you guys my full review on how I feel about it. So I've been a big fan of L'Oreal foundations for a long time. I have two others here that I love. This is the L'Oreal True Match Original and the L'Oreal True Match Lumi. I have a bunch of different shades because I self-tan often, so my shade's constantly changing. But these are two foundations that I have loved from the drugstore and have been some of my favorites for a long time. And the L'Oreal True Match Lumi just happens to be my absolute top favorite foundation from the drugstore. So when I knew that this guy was coming out, I was very excited about it. And it's been sold out everywhere, so I finally got my hands on it at Walmart. And at Walmart it retails for about $10, but on L'Oreal's website and at Target and other drugstore locations it does retail for a bit more. On L'Oreal's website it's $12.99, but like I said, I got mine for $10 and I've seen it all the way up in the like $14 range. So just check your different drugstores and find the best price for this guy, and always make sure you're looking for coupons for drugstore products. So I am wearing this foundation on my skin today. This is the only foundation I have on. At this point, I do have concealer, powder, bronzer, highlight, blush. I've got everything layered on top of it, but this is the overall look of the foundation on my skin. And before we jump into the review, I want to go ahead and show you guys a demo of me applying this foundation to my skin. So to prep my skin, I'm using the LA Girl Pro Prep. This is an HD smoothing face primer. I really think it's important to use a face primer with this foundation, so I'm using one that's going to fill in fine lines and enlarged pores. And then I'm going in with the L'Oreal Infallible Pro Glow Foundation in the shade 202 Creamy Natural. And I'm going to apply it on either side of my skin. So on one side, I'm going to be using a foundation brush, and on the other side, I'm going to be using a beauty blender sponge. My face tends to have a little bit of blemishes. It's got a little bit of discoloration, but I don't personally need a lot of coverage. So on the left side of my face, I'm using the Morphe Elite No. 6 Flat Top Foundation Brush. I find that this brush applies the foundation beautifully. It builds up coverage really, really well, and it blends out really nicely. And then when I go in and pat and press the foundation brush onto my skin, it does really pack and build up coverage and blend into the skin. Very natural looking, but it still maintains a lot of coverage, and it's very luminous. Then on the right side of my face, I'm going to be using my Beauty Blender. This is the original Beauty Blender. I do find that when I pounce and buff the foundation onto my skin with the Beauty Blender, it tends to shear out the formula just a bit. So I do need to build it up a little bit more with the Beauty Blender than I do with the foundation brush, but it does blend very well. It looks very smooth, and it still maintains a lot of luminosity. And I find that I prefer using the foundation brush opposed to the Beauty Blender with this particular foundation because I think it builds better, and I like to have a little bit more coverage. This is the foundation completely applied to my skin. It has a medium, very buildable coverage, very luminous. It does a great job of smoothing out skin's texture, and it looks very healthy and flawless on the skin. My favorite thing about this foundation is the way that it applies. It's so smooth, it's so creamy, it honestly blends into the skin like butter. I would say that this foundation is almost self-blending with how well that it just like smooths over the skin and just like melts in and makes its cozy way on into the foundation. And I think that this is such a beautiful finish of the foundation, which is kind of what it's known for, is being the Pro Glow foundation. It's gonna have this very luminous, healthy, glowy look to the skin. And I do think that it does a good job of that. I do find that it builds very well, which I appreciate. I love having foundations that will build. That way you can customize the finish of your makeup. That way you can make sure you get more coverage in certain areas where you have blemishes and keep it a little bit softer in areas that the skin's more perfected, and you can get that flawless look without having to overwhelm the skin with a lot of foundation. So this foundation is a radiant finish for normal to dry skin, and it does claim to be hydrating, which I totally agree with. I think it's very hydrating, and I think that it does have a beautiful radiant finish to the skin. This one also claims to be 24-hour long wearing, which is a very long time. A wear time of 24 hours is almost unreasonable. I don't know if anyone out there really wears their foundation for 24 hours, but I definitely do not think that this foundation would wear that long. It is a long wearing foundation, but I definitely have foundations in my collection that last longer, and generally the longer wearing foundations tend to be more of a drying formula. So with this being hydrating and being glowy, I definitely don't think it's going to be more than like 8 hours wear, but if you are extremely dry, that's something that you're probably willing to compensate, because if you're super dry and you're trying to wear a lot of super long wearing foundations, they can be too drying on your skin and they can look cakey and get uncomfortable. But I do think that with how glowy this is, it has a decent wear time. I just wouldn't say it's like overwhelmingly long. I wouldn't say it's 24 hours, and I wouldn't recommend wearing this foundation if you are having a particularly long day. If you are going to photo shoots, if you have a super like busy schedule ahead of you, if you have a lot of meetings that day, if you're for whatever reason need to have your foundation on for a very significant amount of time without touch-ups, I don't think that this will be the best foundation for you. I think that this is better for those of you who are just running to work or going to school or need like a typical wear foundation that you don't have to mess with, don't have to fuss with, and you can get taken care of really quickly in the morning. But I wouldn't recommend this for 24 hours at all. The next claim is the coverage level, which is a medium coverage. Totally agree with that. I think it has a beautiful medium coverage. I think you can build it up a little bit to like a full medium, but definitely not to the point of like high full coverage. So if you're wanting to kind of even out skin's texture or even out any sort of hyperpigmentation or just discoloration, I think it'd be great for you. If you have a lot of discoloration though, or a lot of acne scarring or even current acne, or if you're someone who suffers from melasma or anything super intense to cover, I don't think that this would cover it for you, especially if you're not using concealer, but it's definitely a great medium coverage. And then the texture is Air Light, which I totally agree with. Very lightweight, feels great on the skin. I can barely feel it. One thing that I do notice with it is it does transfer. If you're touching your face, you get a little bit of makeup on your hands or on your significant other. So if you are someone who's constantly needing makeup to not transfer off the face, or if you're constantly brushing up against people, then I would definitely recommend setting this with a powder just so you can avoid that transfer. Now, I'm someone who likes to wear a lot of makeup. I like full coverage. I like to layer it all on the skin, and I don't care if people think it's cakey. I just love that kind of makeup. So for me, being able to build this is really important, and it does build very well, but I do notice that it tends to kind of build up on the skin and settle into fine lines or almost show off texture in some areas. For the most part, I think the texture of this is gorgeous. It looks very smooth, very evened out, but I definitely recommend wearing a primer with this foundation. I think this is a foundation you have to wear a primer with, because it does settle in fine lines and it does settle in enlarged pores, and it won't look as pretty and flawless if you don't use a primer. So I used a smoothing primer, so I definitely recommend using something like that. And if you're oily, I probably wouldn't suggest using this foundation at all. If you're combo normal to oily, then maybe you could get away with it if you use a mattifying primer. But those of you who are oily, not dry, I would definitely stay away from this, because it does get very luminous going on throughout the day. If you are hot, if you are getting sweaty, if you are normal and just get oily in the T-zone area, then I think that this is going to tend to show shine throughout the day much quicker. I'm not surprised that this foundation gets oily throughout the day. It is supposed to be radiant, it's hydrating, it's glowy. All those factors tend to make your foundation break up quicker and look more oily throughout the day. I would just suggest making sure you use a really good primer and a really good powder and a setting spray if you're wanting this to stay in place. I find that if I use a really good setting spray paired with the powder and the primer, I don't have an issue with it at all, and it wears really well. But I definitely think that you need to use those things. If you're using just this foundation on its own, I don't think it's gonna last on you. So overall, I do think this is a great foundation. I'm very happy with it. I wish they had a bigger color selection. I believe they only have 12 shades currently, but rumor has it that L'Oreal is adjusting it and coming out with more deeper skin tones. I'm the second color in the range, which right now is a little light for me just because I have a self tan, but I think that the lighter, like more light skin tone range is beautiful. There's just not a lot out there for you medium to darker complexions, so definitely keep that in mind. But their True Match collection has a great range of color if you are wanting to try out a L'Oreal foundation and need a different or deeper color. I still say that my favorite L'Oreal foundation is the True Match Lumi. I like this one better because I think that it looks better without a primer, whereas this one I don't think you can wear without a primer. And I find that this one wears better throughout the day. It kind of fades with dignity. It doesn't transfer as easily. And even though it's not quite as dewy as this guy is, I think that it just lasts better on the skin throughout the day, which I appreciate. And I love the way that this feels and wears. This is my favorite foundation from the drugstore. So this doesn't do me any wrong, but I do definitely love the new L'Oreal. And one of the things that definitely stands out to me about this foundation is it is amazing for mixing. I am someone who loves mixing my foundations. I love combining different textures or finishes or coverage levels to customize my own perfect foundation. And this formula is so good for blending and mixing into other foundations. If you want to mix this into a foundation that you already love to give more luminosity or to maybe thin out the formula or to make it more blendable, then I think that this does an amazing job at that. And I add this to a lot of my really thick, fuller coverage foundations just to give it that more like natural skin-like luminosity that I absolutely love. I think this is a great foundation. I think it's definitely worth checking out, especially for those of you with dry skin. I wouldn't say it's my favorite drugstore foundation, and I wouldn't say it's anything that's a total game changer in the cosmetic industry, but I definitely like it, I definitely approve it, and I do recommend it. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I hope you found it useful. I hope you got some good insights about this foundation, and I hope you guys enjoy seeing something that's more of a review versus a first impressions, because I really want to put out content that's actually helpful to you guys and will give you more information than just a couple minutes into my life. So definitely let me know your feedback in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts if you guys have used this foundation before. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed, and down below in the description box I will have more details about this video, and I will also leave my social media links so you guys can find me on other platforms too. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see y'all later. Mwah!